Good afternoon, everybody. This is Purple Update Live Game Day Edition, brought to you by. Let's see if I can do it. Wait a minute. Grey Duck Vodka. Grey Duck Vodka. Get the duck out. Grey Duck Vodka is brought to you by Vikings legend Chad Greenway. It's Minnesota's premier vodka, so if you're going to the liquor store before the game tonight, you might want to pick up some Grey Duck Vodka. Otherwise, the show is brought to you by McDonald's Liquor. McDonald's Liquor is a liquor store in South Minneapolis near Lake Nokomis, which is where I live. Well, it's game day, Monday Night Football. Hooray. It's a huge game for a multitude of reasons. If you're new to this show, we stream live across multiple platforms. If you want to ask a question, please do. I can see what you're typing in the chat on the respective social media accounts or YouTube, so we can get into that. There's a few things I wanted to talk about. Keys to the game. Something cool that I and Joel Oberly, the editor of our websites, purplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com, are going to be doing tonight, as well as an article preview that I have for an article that should be posted within the hour. First, tonight, Joel Oberly and I will be doing our debut episode of game commentary, live game commentary, on an app called Hot Mic. Hot Mic as in microphone, so M-I-C. If you have a iPhone or any sort of device that can link to the Apple Store, you can download the app for Hot Mic. It's free. I will link to that in the article for this show, and you'll be able to watch me and Mr. Oberly live. It'll be able to sync up to your TV regardless of what provider you have, and you will get a little bit of a different view on the game than you normally would get. It's Monday Night Football, so they do bring out some good announcers, but a lot of the time you get like the B team from, Fox that doesn't really care too much about the team. So it's fun to get local guys. It's fun to get guys who are passionate about the team, and we'll be doing that tonight starting at kickoff. So definitely tune into that. Use the code purplePTSD when you download, so we get credit for it. We get money for that, so that would be nice because clearly I need money. So the last few days I've been kicking around an article in my head. As I've been writing articles kind of defending or explaining, rather, Cousins' success this season and my thoughts on it. I wrote an article about the Broncos game, whether or not it was the best game of Cousins' Vikings career, whether or not that mattered. Then I talked about the MVP race and whether or not he was the MVP. Spoiler alert, he's not. And whether that mattered. The crux of that was that it matters in that if you're playing well enough to be mentioned in that conversation, then that's a good thing. So it matters. But outside of that, I think it's kind of a subjective and arbitrary measure. It's voted on by people in the sports media, and those people have biases, and so it's not necessarily something that we need to waste a lot of time talking about. And the reason that I really wanted to talk about it is because I thought people were taking that argument almost too literally or too binarily, like either he's the MVP or he's terrible. There wasn't really any room in between. And I've noticed that, and perhaps I'm on the other side of this and I just don't see it, but people are attempting to explain away some of the success he's had this year, either by saying, well, it's because of Dalvin Cook, or it's still not enough to justify his contract, or he still hasn't beaten anybody of note, or whatever. And it's at this point, I feel like a lot of people are just saying things because they don't want to be wrong on Vikings Twitter or Vikings Reddit. So that's kind of my standpoint on it. And because I've written those articles, I was kind of thinking about writing something in regards to the contract, because the number one thing you hear online when people talk about Cousins' contract or his play is his contract. If he gets a bad game, I get countless messages on social media. How about that $84 million? $84 million. Hey, did you hear about the $84 million? Yes, he got paid $84 million. Yes, it was a record at the time, and yes, that's a lot of money. Now, a lot of money in NFL terms is relative, as you guys know. Even backup long snappers, if there is such a thing, which there really isn't, make a lot of money compared to like a successful dentist even. So I think we need to look at things from that standpoint in regards to what's relative. And Cousins, again, it was a record at the time, but it set the market, and it's not that much money now, considering. The article I wrote was based on an article in today's Washington Post about Cousins, in retrospect, his contract being a bargain. And that's an attempt by the writer of that article to find an objective way to quantify that. And I think he does a decent job, or at least an interesting enough job to merit discussion in addition to what I was talking about. So, if you guys want to skip the article, I recommend you read it. But the long and short of it is that there's a metric by True Media that somehow, through an algorithm, analyzes expected points as well as how a quarterback is performing versus the status quo and what that means in terms of contract dollars. And so, for example, Cousins in 2018 was only adding 0.2 expected points versus what the Vikings otherwise would have scored, or another team would have scored in that situation, or in the situations of each game. And so Cousins really only earned, by this metric, $1.1 million of the $24 million that he was paid last year. Now, this opens a whole can of worms, but when you're looking at quarterback performance, it's based on other things as well. It's not a vacuum-based performance. And so you would have to say, well, why did he perform so poorly? I've talked about that ad nauseum. I think there's a lot to do with the offensive line, the lack of consistency from the offensive coordinators, plural, which means something as well, and the lack of support from the running game, which is tied to both of the aforementioned things. And all three of them, or actually all four of them, the line, Cousins, the running game, and the two offensive coordinators, those things all are co-linked. So it's very complex. It's more complex than I think a lot of people make it out to be. But I applaud True Media and the author of this article for attempting to at least cut through that. And so by those same metrics this season, Cousins has added 8 points versus what is expected, which, let's see, is worth $47 million this season in compensation versus what he's getting paid. So he's almost doubling his value this season, and that includes the first 4 games, not just since week 4. That also almost brings him even with what he's been paid versus what he's done. And a lot of people will say, well, then it isn't a bargain because he's still behind. But since he's in the midst of a season where he's almost doubling his value, I expect him to fully be in the black by next season when his contract is up. We've talked about re-signing him on this show last week to an extension. This is good news for the team right now. Next year, I don't think it's good news moving forward. I tied in some other, like Jared Goff's contract, where Cousins' contract next season ranks as a percentage of the salary cap. He'll be the 7th highest paid quarterback by that metric next season. By design, Cousins wanted another extension after 3 years. He wanted to earn or to prove that he was worth it and also cash in on more money because he knew his contract would set the market. So, that having been said, whether or not the Vikings are even able to re-sign him after next year is one thing. Whether they want to is another. A lot of people are saying, well, they have to win more big games or win a playoff game, so on and so forth. But at this point, I think he's more than justified bringing him in. I don't think that's even a question. I think he's done things this season that Case Keenum never would have done. I think also we've seen from Case Keenum the last 2 seasons that his success may have been a fluke, or it could have been just a perfect mix of variables, him, Shermer, so on. It's the talent around him, but Keenum couldn't take advantage of the talent around him as much as Cousins could, just based on the fact that he couldn't make all the throws on the field. He wasn't allowed to make all the throws on the field. He was typically just hindered to 2 separate options each play, whereas Cousins will go through any normal quarterback progressions and hit his 3rd or 4th read, as opposed to looking deep, then quickly dumping it off because the offensive line is falling apart, or he feels that it is. So I think that's really important, and I think, again, that Cousins deserves credit, and I will not rest until I see universal credit for Cousins, which I know never will happen. I'm kidding a little bit. But that article will be on Vikings territory soon, so if you want to read it, go right ahead. I kind of spoiled it, but hey. Again, it's quality stuff here. Joe Oberly and I will be doing our first episode of game commentary from his house in Fridley tonight, so tune into that. Please download Hot Mic and use the discount code purplePTSD. I believe that's not. I should probably know what that is. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But check the article; it'll be in there, and maybe I'll be able to eat a sandwich if enough of you guys sign up. A few keys to tonight's game and my thoughts on it. I know that the Randy Stone, you're back, man. I missed you. I missed your musk. Randy says, I believe Spielman and Zimmer when they said the ceiling was higher with Cousins. I think that's true, and I also think that we've seen that. I think that's it goes without saying. I touch on the article. People probably saying, well, of course, Cousins is overperforming. Look at the talent around him. The argument that we had recently about that I had on Twitter that I discussed in my article and on the show about Cousins being the beneficiary of yards after the catch in the Dallas game. Sure. That doesn't matter to me. That was a game plan. They wanted to do a lot of misdirection screens. It worked. Cousins completed those throws. He got hit after completing those throws. The key is that we wanted a guy who could make the most of the talent around him in the right system. I think they found that. I think it took a while to find that because there was zero consistency last season. You couldn't learn a lot from last season because there's no protection. There's no consistency from the offensive coordinators. I've said this now. I'm getting repetitive, but... And maybe that's what you mean by robotic, Tang, or maybe because I'm in HD now, you can see that my pupils are not dilating, and therefore I'm some sort of lizard person. But I think if you were to say that would just defend bringing Cousins in, you want a guy, and the guy, I've always said this since the first article I wrote about us potentially getting Cousins, you want an elite systems guy or an elite game manager because the talent around him around any quarterback on this team is so good in the skill positions that you don't need anything spectacular. Now, they paid for something spectacular. I understand that. But that's what happens when you can't draft or develop a quarterback for decades. And so, yes, we paid a premium for it. Am I upset about that? No, because the alternative was more of the same, and more of the same clearly wasn't getting it done. The Vikings are averaging about 26, 27 points a game this season. If they had the same defense as the 2017 Vikings that allowed 15.5 points a game, I'm not even mad about the 8-3 record, but based on how the 3 games they lost this season went, I would argue that they'd be undefeated. So, maybe I shouldn't focus on Cousins so much because that's not really what's going on right now, or that's not the issue with this team. The issue is the secondary, but I do think that it's important because I still see people bringing up his contract constantly, and I wanted to explain that away a little bit as I'm doing like my trilogy or quadrilogy of Cousins is the best articles. Oh, my voice is robotic? Is it still robotic? As in, something's wrong with the app? Because if that's the case, I give up. Because my computer exploded again. I've been waiting all day for Walmart.com to get back to me so I can go pick up a new one. And it is not happening. And I'm getting extremely frustrated because I need it to do the hot mic thing tonight. Let me see how it sounds. This is going to be some meta stuff, but I'm going to go online and listen to myself talk. And if you guys will hang in there with me, I would appreciate it. I might have to restart, which is extremely frustrating. I don't know why this happens. Man. Oh, that's why. Test 1 2 3. All right, so now I'm listening to myself. Man. Oh, that's why. Test 1 2 3. All right, so now I'm listening. Okay, I hear what you mean. I mean, it's not horrible. I won't restart anything, but I hope it's not the mic because it's my phone. I have a laptop, but it's new, but it's garbage. And so I'm doing it from my phone because you remember when I did it last time from my laptop, you couldn't hear me at all. So I've been doing it from my phone, which has worked for the most part. I'm hoping maybe it's a YouTube thing. I'll mess around with the controls afterwards. I won't be too much longer then. It doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound horrible. It's definitely not gonna get me any new followers. But story of my life. The positive sign of it is I am going to pick up a new computer as soon as I hear from Walmart to go pick it up. So that's cool. Where was I? Oh, yeah, Spielman being the best GM. I agree with you. I mean, I don't know how much of his hit rate has been Zimmer because his hit rate on defense is spectacular. It's almost ungodly. It's too perfect. I mean, and that makes me wonder how much of it is Zimmer seeing guys and identifying talent that will work in his system, or developing guys that he's been drafted to fit in his system that otherwise wouldn't have worked elsewhere, or some combination of the two. It's obviously a combination of the two because not everyone is the same. I mean, you look at everybody that he's drafted and early on defense, or even guys undrafted free agents like Holton Hill, and it's spectacular. And that's always been my argument as to why they should focus more on the offensive line early and defensive players later, because it's easier. Hey everybody, I am back. This is part 2 of Purple Update Live. My phone, it's easier. Hey everybody, my phone cut out, or actually a notification came up and kicked me off, but I think we're back, and you guys didn't have to rejoin, which is nice. Sorry about that. I'll just post this as 2 videos. On offense, like I was saying, on defense, there's a higher probability of them taking late round guys and developing them. They've shown that in the Zimmer era. Every single offensive lineman that they took 4th round or later was a bust, from Willie Beavers on down to whoever. TJ Clemmings was a 4th round guy, so on and so forth. There's a multitude of guys, a lot of 6th and 7th round guys that didn't stick as well, and a lot of people in Spielman's defense say, well, those guys don't hit, so you can't blame them for that. And it's like, well, that's why you don't build an offensive line that way, because if your logic is that they're not going to stick, then of course you're not going to build an offensive line that way. That was always my argument with the team that went 5-0 into the bye in 2016 and then fell apart. And a lot of people are saying, well, it's bad luck. You know, the offensive line got really banged up and injured, and you can't really blame that on anybody. But if you look at who they signed, Andre Smith, what's his face, Long, who hadn't played for a season. You know, if you're bringing in guys who are over 30, who are injury prone and haven't played for a while, and they get hurt, that's by design. That's not bad luck. That's not the Vikings curse. That's the fact that you relied on high-risk injury players, and they did what high-risk injury players do, especially old ones. They got injured. And so I've never been happy with how the offensive line has been handled on this team. You know, when I advocated for Cousins being brought in heavily, I was under no delusion that he was a perfect quarterback, or that he didn't wilt under pressure, or that he didn't get happy feet. I was just under the impression that with Berger leaving, and depending on what they knew about Easton at the time, they at least knew he wasn't going to be ready to start the season, that they would invest in some interior offensive linemen. They didn't do that. They invested in tackles, and then they had to move one to guard, one who had never played guard. So that bothered me, and I really think that was the impetus for everything that happened last season. I think things could have been different with DiFilippo had they had a better offensive line, and I don't want to defend DiFilippo because that's not going to get me a whole lot of positive feedback, but it just was hubris to take Hughes. Now, looking back at it, we needed Hughes, and we need him. And so I've gotten some flack for saying that, But it's not really a one or the other thing. They could have taken Hughes and I like Brian O'Neill. He's been spectacular. But they could have taken an interior lineman in the second round or taken a corner in the second round and picked up any of the four guards that were taken between 30 and 40 who all ended up being day one starters and really, really good players. So Spielman's record is a little bit murkier for me than other people. I don't want to. You can't blame Teddy on him, but the Ponder pick was bad. But that having been said, I'm a Vikings fan, and so I'm not going to nitpick. I'm not a Patriots fan. I don't expect perfection. I actually expect whatever the opposite term for perfection you want to use, disaster. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, well, he hit 9 out of 10 of these picks hit, even though they were defense, and he sucks and therefore should be fired. No, I don't agree with everything he's done, and I don't think he's perfect. But nothing is, and again, I'm trying to. One of my main goals is to have things be so internet-y and saying either a guy's great or he sucks, which is what happens when you're debating somebody one-on-one because you're trying to disprove their point, and their point is either that someone is good or bad. So I understand that, but anyway, there's a game tonight. The Vikings. I don't know how you guys feel about it. If you would let me know. But I agree. No, Tang said you can't pass that much without a solid offensive line. I agree. I mean, I said this offseason that I wasn't going to make any more excuses for Cousins if he wilted because they did invest in the offensive line. Now, it could have been too little too late. A lot of young guys, there was going to be some growing pains. There was going to be a question as to whether or not they would gel. But I think by all accounts, things are going well. I think getting Klein back tonight is huge. I think that's the biggest thing. It's even bigger than getting back Adam Thielen, in my opinion, who isn't coming back. But I would rather have Klein just based on the drop in performance there without him versus what Diggs and company have been able to do without Thielen, and I don't want to rush Thielen back for tonight and then have him be out for the rest of the season like they did a couple weeks ago. Or you could, I mean, it depends on whether you think Thielen rushed himself back or if the team did. That we've talked about that on the show, so I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, the offensive line is incredibly important. It's, in my opinion, the most important position group outside of quarterback in the entire game. So, look what Cousins has been able to do with a mediocre offensive line. It's been great. It's a lot of credit goes to Kubiak and Rick Dennison, especially. Those guys are amazing. I'm enamored with Kubiak and his team. I think they're completely underrated. I know he retired for health reasons, and that he's really happy with his role, and I don't think he wants the stress of being a coordinator, and definitely not of being a head coach. But man, he could take any job he wants in this league, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I mean, well, you guys know how I feel about Spielman. I would definitely keep him after his contract is up next year. Whether or not we keep Zimmer is another question. I think tonight's a big test in that regard. I don't think cosmically, it's just very strange that every other position seems to be playing well outside of the secondary, which is Zimmer's position. I mean, that's where he cut his teeth in the NFL. That's his specialty. That's where he spent his most draft capital. That's where a lot of money has been spent. I really, really, really want to see what they're going to do tonight. No, they had a like 4 or 5 game day off stretch during the bye week, which I hope Xavier Rhodes used drinking stem cells or something. But they did what I was hoping they would do, which is go back to fundamentals, because I really think that, and this might not be a popular opinion, but that Rhodes, outside of the a few examples where he's just been burned or missed an open field tackle, has been in relatively good position. He's just not making that extra move or getting his head turned around or getting his hand up at the right time. And I think that's all based on the fact that his body just isn't doing, and I've said this before, so I apologize for the guys that have been here every day, but he's getting older. He's clearly banged up, and even a split or a hair of a second in that position can make the difference between an interception, a batted ball, or a touchdown or a completion. So I'm hoping that by going back to the fundamentals, that Rhodes will be able to retrain himself based on his new body, because that's something that you have to do to stay in this league is continue to keep your output or your performance at a certain level, despite the fact that your input isn't the same. You're slower, you're not as strong, you don't recover as quickly, so on and so forth. And so I think it's going to be a huge deal to see what Rhodes in particular, but the secondary does tonight, because last season the Vikings were up 6-0 in the fourth quarter against this team, the Seahawks. I think in the entire game, Russell Wilson had 72 passing yards. It was his worst game, worst game of his entire career. So while things change season to season, I think we'll have a really good kind of litmus test to see not only how the secondary compares to last season, because the defense was up and down last season as well, not in that game obviously, but also moving forward what we can expect when the Vikings play other NFC powerhouse teams. They've done really well against Russell Wilson in his career, surprisingly. Mobile quarterbacks tend to be their kryptonite, and he's not necessarily Lamar Jackson, but he can extend plays. Xavier Rhodes talked about that during the bye. Talked about how he was being facetious or hyperbolic, but he talked about 30-second plays, because Wilson can run 20 yards backwards and then spin out and extend plays and so on and so forth. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings had a spy on him tonight. I'm a lot more confident than I was a week ago, let's say, just because they know how to stop him. They've done it on a relatively consistent basis, and I think that Zimmer should be smart enough to at least limit him this season. Now, he's arguably having the best season of his career, and Wilson, our secondary, is looking like a shell of its former self, but Zimmer should have enough tricks up his sleeve, hopefully, to stop him. But on the other side of that scares me, because sometimes Zimmer out-schemes himself. So that's my main concern. We had, 9-10 days between before the Chiefs game, and that game plan clearly didn't work. I think Zimmer has had a tendency again to get too cute, which is shy. If I was going to make merch for this show, it'd be "Don't be too cute." God damn it. And so we'll see, but I think it's going to Stefanski. Okay, so Tang says Zimmer has had coaching blunders and has been out coached from time to time. Now, those times I think are specific, and they're telling. The times that he's been out coached, I think it's been against elite offensive-minded coaches and in big games. And I would argue that tonight we have both of those things. So I'm kind of going back and forth between those things. But I definitely think, just based on last season's output, that this offense is going to put up enough points in the Vikings to have buried the Seahawks if they were playing them last year. 2 field goals last season. I think that's what it was. It was 6-0 either way. The defense just has to do an okay job, and I think they'll be fine. I am a little surprised that the line is 3 points, considering it's in Seattle, considering all the negative national thoughts about the Vikings and primetime and the things that I've been talking about. But, the hype for Cousins is real, and I think a lot of people are anticipating a shootout. Whether or not that happens is contingent on a few factors. Wilson's been sacked 11 times in the last 2 games, and so I'm interested to see what Hunter and Griffin will do. It looks like is Linval coming back? I seem to remember that he is. I apologize if he isn't. I didn't see him on the injury or on the final injury report, but then again, today's been just a nightmare of Walmart.com issues and PayPal issues, and me realizing that I live in abject poverty because I love the Vikings so much, emotional poverty and financial poverty. We've talked a lot on this show about the difference between pressures and sacks and why that is. Quarterbacks getting the ball off quickly, the lack of interior pressure, so the pressure going behind the quarterback or the quarterback stepping up into the pocket. And so I want to see Danielle Hunter have a huge game tonight. He's got 8.5 sacks, but he's got the most pressures in the league. Everson Griffin has or had the most pressures before the bye. I think Russell Wilson does respect this defense. He said a lot of really great things about each player outside of Trey Waynes. He talked about Xavier Rhodes a little bit and how he respected him. Mackenzie Alexander, he talked about, and maybe it's a Big Ten thing because Trey Waynes went to Michigan State and Wilson went to Wisconsin, but he didn't say anything about him. I, they're really going to focus on stopping Dalvin, and that's obviously not breaking news, but the Seahawks have held their opponent to under 100 yards rushing as a team in 11 of their games this year. And I think that's got a lot to do with the trio of linebackers that they have on the field a lot. They're like the defensive version of the Vikings offense, where the Vikings are moving away from 11 personnel, the 3 wide receiver sets, and they're doing more heavy personnels with 2 or 3 tight ends, 2 running backs. The Seahawks love to have 3 linebackers on the field. I think in the last show I talked about their starting 3 linebackers being on the field 100% of the time, 94% of the time, and then 75% of the time. That's crazy in an NFL where the nickel is the norm, and so that worries me a little bit. The article that I wrote about Cousins talks about like the DVOA of the Vikings run offense and how it's 10th in the league that way, but top 3 in results. I think that's just a testament to the heavy personnel that they run and the balance that they want. I don't think 10th is horrible, but DVOA is basically looking at each play as what every team would do in that exact situation. So if it's 1st and 10 from Seattle's 40 and the Vikings pick up 8 yards on a run, what other teams pick up with that exact play? How they figure that out, I don't know. Math is weird. I think it's proof we live in a simulation. I think someone's being murdered upstairs from my apartment. But I think tonight's going to really come down to Dalvin. Now, Seattle doesn't have a great pass defense, though. So I think we might see Dalvin take advantage of things the opposite of what anti-Kirk Cousins people say, which is Cousins is taking advantage of Cook. I think they're really going to try to fluster Cousins, and I think that might open things up in the run game. I just hope they do what they've been doing, to be honest. Play action, delayed play action, regular play action, bootlegs, rollouts. Get Cousins out of the pocket, get him away from... Is Clowney playing? I haven't checked. I know he's been hurt. If someone could... Yeah. Randy actually said that. That's weird, man. Brilliant minds think alike. He's come on as of late, but I know he's got groin issues and abdomen issues, and that sounds kind of like the precursor to a hernia. To me, I've had hernia surgery and a hernia. It's no joke, especially when considering what his job is and the cuts he has to make. And I need to I'm back now. So I'll get out of here before my phone dies and I cut off to a third time. I wanted to just make sure that I am back up. I think I am, and I think you guys are still here. When I get my new computer, there we go. When I get my new computer, this should be the last time we do the show this way. So I appreciate everyone for sticking with me. Also, I think the Vikings, if there is, strangely enough, a game for them to bounce back in the secondary, it should be tonight. Lockett, obviously, is a huge play guy, and he's only a game removed from being in the hospital for 2 days because of a contusion to his leg. He fully admitted that he wasn't 100% last week. I can't imagine he would be 100% this week either. He still had 1 catch for 38 yards last week. Wilson's QB rating when throwing to him is insane. So I would be all for putting Trey Waynes on him the entire game because Waynes has the speed to keep up with him, and he's playing a much more consistent game than Rhodes has been. And so, that having been said, the Vikings defense has given up 21 explosive plays over the last 3 games, an explosive play being a play of 16 or more yards, 663 pass yards in the last 2 games as well. But they're 6th against the run, so that might help against Chris Carson. I don't know. I think that Zimmer, again, I want to bet on Zimmer, and he's had enough time, and he's had enough experience against this team that's had enough consistency on their roster to at least he should be able to put together a game plan that limits Russell Wilson tonight. And considering how Cousins and company have been playing, I fully expect the Vikings to win tonight. And if they don't, I'll be very disappointed. I think it'll be a relatively close game early, but I think that the Vikings will come out on top. I mean, it scares me because I want them to win so badly that I feel that they won't. Because I'm programmed that way, because look at all my Vikings stuff. Obviously, I'm a Vikings fan. I'm used to that. And so, emotionally, I feel like they're just going to get destroyed. It's similar to the Gophers this weekend. But rationally, I think it's not so much... It's not, I guess, as bad as some naysayers are saying it's going to be. I think a lot of things are trending the Vikings' direction. I should leave it at that. And so I appreciate you guys hanging in there. I apologize for the pauses in the video. Again, I am getting a new computer as soon as Walmart emails me. I know it's Cyber Monday, but come on. I just need you to email me. One thing, it's computer generated. Goo. And so hopefully tomorrow I will be on my fancy new computer, and you guys won't have to watch this video in 3 segments. But again, you guys are the best. Randy, Tang, you guys have been here. I mean, Tang's here every... I almost feel like that's just a fake account my mom made or something, in the best way possible. And Randy, it's awesome that you've been here. The show's been getting a lot of views. We got over 1,000 views last episode on Friday. And so I'll be back every day this week. And rain or shine, it's going to be rough tomorrow, though, if they lose. I'll be very, 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 very disappointed. So that might be worth watching, because who knows what'll happen. And at least you'll get to see the Walmart.com computer that I bought start on fire and burn my house down. So that should be fun. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. DOD's here. We're like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That in a good way. That's there's no good way to that. Quality stuff. I feel like you guys are watching the Blair Witch Project too, which how much my hand is shaking. I really, really need to either get a stand or get my computer. Anyway, again, check out the article for this episode on VikingsTerritory.com, and you will see the link to Hot Mic. That'll be me and Oberly watching tonight's game and doing live game commentary. And it doesn't matter, I guess, if you have like bunny ears or cable or DirecTV, it'll sync up to your TV. So you don't have to worry about us being 5 minutes behind or anything like that, and it'll also be done on a much nicer and less shaky camera. So that should be fun. And if I understand correctly, you guys will be able to chat with us. So I hope Tang, DOD, Randy, if it's not too much to ask, if you guys wanted to come, that'd be great. Unfortunately, right now it's just an Apple iPhone iOS app. They're rolling out their Android app in December, or this month. You can download it now, but we have a code that gives us credit for it, and then we get money. So I'll have the code. I'm pretty sure it's purplePTSD, though. But I'll double-check that, and I'll have that in the article as well in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone, again, for tuning in. If you're going to go to the liquor store before the game, go to McDonald's Liquor if you're in South Minneapolis or Richfield, and pick up some Grey Duck vodka, because I want Chad Greenway to like me. I have his autograph, and I have no friends. So can you stream what DOD asked if you could stream on his channel? What channel? You should be able to stream it regardless of how you watch it, even if you stream online, as long as you have an Apple device. Yeah, it sucks that there's no Android. I know Tang will be there once there is, but we'll be doing as many games for the rest of the season as they ask us to, and then looking to do it next year. It should be really fun. I'm excited to do it. We did some of that last year just on our own, but the problem we did find was that everyone was on different times. So on Hulu, for example, people are always like 5 minutes behind, which I actually like because I watch it on Hulu a lot. And we do a live chat on Vikings Territory and Purple PTSD, and so I'll know what's happening. And in a strange way, that it makes it less stressful for me, because especially in recent games, it's been a lot of positive stuff. So I'll see a lot of yes, and I'll be like, okay, now I don't have to, I can take the gun out of my mouth, eat some chips. And so yeah, just keep an eye out for that. But I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you guys will as well. And thanks, man. Someone said my hat looks amazing. I struggle mentally as to whether or not I should wear this hat because I feel like it makes me look like an idiot and a rube, but I am those things. But I'm also kind of, I guess, a serious business owner, so I don't want to look like the guy you would avoid tailgating, you know, in his Fiero and like class of 2002 leather jacket. But damn it, I look good in it, and it's comfortable, and I like it. So I appreciate the compliment. Uh, I should be back tomorrow around this time too. We're gonna do morning Joes in the morning, and then I have a meeting about some really exciting future moves that we're making. That's gonna blow your guys' mind. It's gonna be super cool. It's taken me like 3 years to coordinate this, and I had a meeting about it this morning. And I wish I could tell you what it is, but we're not close. We're not ready to do that yet. But it's gonna be like game changing in regards to content, and you guys are gonna love it. It doesn't just involve my sites. So tomorrow afternoon around this time, I'm shooting for 2 or 3 every day. And so I'll get into a more regular rhythm. I just have a bunch of stuff to do in the morning. I would prefer to do it in the morning, so I think more people watch when they first get to work because they're upset that they're at work, and so they sit in their cube and stream things. I mean, the peak of our traffic is 9:30. It's insane how much traffic we get at 9:30. We'll have 300 people on the network at 9:30. Um, I work from home now, so I don't do that as much, but I fully understand that feeling of, oh my God, it's Monday and it's 9:15 and I'm hungover and the Vikings lost. Quick story before I go. I used to work at a internet startup, and right out of college, and I don't drink anymore because I have a horrible willpower. If you can't tell by the shape of my face and this hat. And so after about a year, I was late a lot and I got written up. I was an ad salesman, internet ad salesman. That's kind of why my sites have grown so fast. And somehow they figured this out of Milwaukee, a bunch of Packers fans. But they said the day after the Vikings lose is the only time you take sick or days off. So in our system, I could take a vacation day myself just by logging in, but they wanted you to give them notice, and I never did. And so they did this correlation between all the days that I actually took sick time unannounced or vacation time, and it was always the day after the Vikings lost. And so if that doesn't tell you the type of person that I am, in general, irresponsible, drinking problem, takes the Vikings way too seriously. If that's not the brand of my show or the sites, I don't know what is. So I appreciate you guys again stopping through, and I'll talk to you tomorrow and or tonight if you stop by the hot mic situation. If I have time, also I might stop by and do a pregame show with someone relatively famous or super famous, insanely famous. If I didn't have to do the hot mic thing, I would be hanging out with this person, and this person is Nick Swartzen, and so I'm very, very, I agreed to do the hot mic thing, so I'm going to do it because that's how business works, but Swartzen's in town and wanted to go out and watch Monday Night Football at the bar, and I am kind of sad that I can't because his flight was delayed, so he's not going to be in at the time that he was supposed to. Anyway, if that happens and you see the show, you might want to hop on because we'll be able to chat with Swartzen and get his thoughts on the team. Otherwise, if I don't see your guys' chat, I'll just ask general questions. I know what you guys will probably ask too. So, go Vikes. I am again picking the Vikings to win. I'm going to say 38-31. Let's do it.